Hi, my name is Katie Kataska, and I am the chair of the Professional Development Committee of the New Jersey Library Association. In the Library Career Path series, we'll be interviewing librarians from a wide variety of positions within the field, from public positions to music outreach and even business librarians. So newcomers and seasoned librarians alike can learn more about the many career options available in the field that they may not have been aware of. We hope you enjoy these interviews, and please like and subscribe to our channel below to help promote the Library Career Path series. Thanks so much for watching this series. We hope you enjoy it. Take care. Okay, great. So thank you again for being with us and you're taking your time. This is really great. So the first question is, can you please give us your name, title, and place of employment?
So my name is Emily Witkowski. I'm the Teen Services Supervisor at the Hunterdon County Library.
And which branch are you at? I actually meant to ask.
So I'm primarily at headquarters right now, but we float between our three sort of primary locations. So I also work shifts at North County and Clinton, and then occasionally at South County as needed, and do tasks at South County as well. So we sort of float all around, and then sometimes we do some programs with our affiliates as well.
Nice. So what inspired you to be a librarian? Did you choose this profession or did it find you?
So I think I'm one of the rare people that always knew they wanted to be a librarian. I think a lot of people kind of discover it somehow or fall into it from a different career. But my mom has my like elementary school yearbook that said I wanted to be a librarian when I grew up. I had a lot of really great library role models. I loved my elementary school librarian. I loved going to the public library. I think I didn't really know what it meant to be a librarian then, obviously, but I loved the idea of working there. So as I got older and kind of learned more about what actually happens in a library, what a library can support people in doing, I think I really fell into that idea of it's a place that supports people, and I really loved that. And um, I've changed what kind of library work I've wanted to do over the time that I've decided I wanted to be a librarian. But I think overall, I always kind of felt that that was the right career path for me.
Nice. Yeah, I also just kind of stumbled into it, and most of the people we've done interviews so far have said the same thing. It's been very interesting. Like so far, no one is like you're the only one who said from the get-go, I knew what I wanted to be.
Yeah, it's very rare to have that. So for anyone, for any career. So especially for something like that, where people don't often think of it as a career. So I
Mhm.
think I'm one of the rare, unusual ones.
Yeah, I know for sure you definitely are. Going on to the next question, then, was there something specific that pointed you in the direction of becoming a youth services librarian?
Yeah, so like I said, I wasn't sure what kind of librarian I wanted to be at first, but I took an internship out of well, I was still actually finishing my degree at Rutgers and at the Piscataway Public Library as their makerspace intern for the summer. So we did a summer makerspace program with upper elementary and middle school age students, and I really loved the idea of working with kids. I originally thought I wanted to be a school librarian, so that had always kind of been in the back of my mind. But seeing what a public library could do for youth, I think really intrigued me, and kind of set me down a path of being more conscious of applying for those kinds of jobs and seeking that kind of employment. And I love working with youth. I've worked with kids and teens, and I wouldn't trade that, I don't think, for anything.
Oh, that's really nice. And how long have you been a teen librarian so far?
So I became a teen librarian probably in like 2016 or so. So just shy of 10 years, I guess, technically. But I started in children's services. So I worked in children's services for a couple of years and then transitioned to teen services, and have always kind of kept a little bit of a foothold in children's as well, helping out when I can, but predominantly teen services since around like 2016.
No, it's cool. So going on to the next question then, so can you describe the interview process?
Sure. So, most public libraries are predominantly interested in like what your philosophy is on public service. I think obviously there's skills that go into that, but I think the majority of questions that I feel like I've encountered in public service kind of jobs is scenario based, or like, what would you do if this happened with a patron? What do you feel the job is of the public library? That kind of thing. Are you comfortable doing X, Y, and Z? Because sometimes you are asked to do things that maybe you didn't learn about in library school and that it falls to the public librarian to do. And that's okay, but it's sort of, I think jobs need to seek that out a little bit as compared to like a school librarian or an academic librarian, where there's probably a little bit different of a skill set that they're looking for and different questions that they're asking. I also found a lot of the job interviews that I've been on for public positions have been about what sort of programming I'd like to do, what sort of outreach I'd like to do. So it's a lot of sort of how do you work with the community? How do you work with the patrons? And what your sort of expectations and goals are in those fields as well. Like what sort of programs do you want to have? Do you want to work with outside organizations? Is that something that you feel strongly about or feel like you can really handle? So I think those are sort of the big things that I've encountered in like job interviews at those kinds of positions.
Nice. So the next question is then, is there an asset that you possess, which you believe may have helped you land your job?
Oh, 100%. I think that volunteering for NJLA has landed me all of my jobs. I started in Maplewood as a children's librarian, and the day before I had that job interview, I happened to be volunteering at the NJLA Adult Services Forum and met the person that I was going to be interviewing with. And I think them seeing me there already involved in NJLA really made me stand out. My current job now, I worked with both of my supervisors closely in NJLA groups. And I think that's sort of what nailed me my job now, is having sort of had that experience with them and them knowing what kind of worker I am and what kind of person I am. So I think 100% like being involved in NJLA landed me my jobs for sure.
Oh, wow, that's so nice to get to meet your interviewer like the day before, because like you
Yeah.
go in and you're like, I have no idea who I'm even meeting. So it's always kind of
Mhm.
nice.
Yeah, no, it was funny. I mean, I was checking someone in at the registration desk and they were like, your name sounds really familiar. And I was like, oh, I'm just in library school. I doubt it. And they were like, are you interviewing for a job tomorrow? And I was like, yes, I am. So yeah, you just never know.
Okay, so for the next question is, what is a typical workday for you?
Whenever someone asks me about a typical workday, I always say there's not really a typical workday in public libraries because you just never really know what's going to happen. But I'd say there's sort of like a couple of buckets of work that happen in a typical workday. So there's sort of the interdepartmental community collaboration piece. So that's a lot of the work that I like to do, especially as a department supervisor, is working with the other departments to see how we can do joint programs or support each other, working with community groups. So it's a lot of communications via email meetings, things like that. Then there's sort of materials ordering, and that might be both books, but also just supplies for programs and things like that. There's outreach. We do a lot of outreach with the schools. So a lot of our time is spent going and visiting the schools, visiting classes and things like that. And then also the public service component of it. I think a lot of times it's easy for librarians to get caught up in a lot of the important work that we do, but a huge part of our job is being on the desk and being there for people. So at some point in the day, I'm always on a service desk. And that's one of my favorite parts of my jobs, is being on the service desk and helping patrons find what they need, answer questions, even just getting to know the teens on a personal basis, being there, a friendly face for them, I think is really important. So I kind of think of those like buckets of work as what a typical like day looks like.
Yeah, yeah. What I like about our day, honestly, is like it's never boring. There's
Mhm.
always something.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
will say that's what's good about being a librarian. It's very active and very
Yes.
varied.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times people think you're just sitting at a desk for a long time, but even when you are on desk, so to speak, you're getting up and going to the stacks, you're helping people find things, you're helping a coworker set up a program, whatever it might be. So it's actually a lot more physical of a job than people think, which I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. And so for the next question, so what skills and qualifications are required for your position? Do they match the current skills and qualifications that you use on a daily basis?
Sure, yeah. So I think I kind of think of my job in two ways. So there's the actual teen services part of my job. So in that case, it's being able to work with teens. Teens are notoriously one of the most difficult age groups to work with, and I think that um, teens get a bad rep. And yes, it's challenging, but it's also meeting them where they are, knowing what they need, and understanding what it's like to be a teenager, especially today, and having some empathy for that. So I kind of think of that like interpersonal. skill set as really important for the actual teen services part of it, as well as a lot of creativity, being creative about your programs, creative about how you meet teens where they are and things like that. So those are kind of the teen services part. But in terms of being like a supervisor, I'd say it's really important that you have a lot of intercommunication skills, that you can communicate with your staff and that they feel comfortable coming to you with issues or concerns, but also that you can work well with community groups. We do a lot of work with, like I said, the schools, but also a lot of these sort of outstanding groups that are in the community that are doing a lot of great work that we want to collaborate with. So, for example, I've done a lot of work with PFLAG, which is a local LGBTQ group, and sort of bringing them in for programming or attending their meetings that they have sort of a liaison to see, so that I'm listening to what's going on in their community and can see if the library can respond to it. So there's sort of like the actual like public service teen side of the skill set, which again is a lot of that sort of empathy and working well with people, and then the supervisor part, which is a little more like forward thinking and thinking about how the library can better position itself in the community to better serve its public.
That's cool. I'm curious also, like, outside of, like, this interview, like, do you feel like like, teen programming has changed a lot over the years? I've always had this conversation with my teen librarian, she goes, "That's a hard question to ask."
It is a hard question. So when I was a teen librarian in Maplewood, I didn't do a lot of programming, so I had so many teens that it was actually really hard to do programs. So I kind of never did the traditional teen programs that a lot of people do, but I would try to think outside the box and do some more unusual things. And I think now too, because teens are so much more overbooked than they ever were before, they have sports and clubs and things that they have commitments for. I think we have to be more creative either about A, what's going to really pull them in and make them want to come to the library if they're not already, and B, if they're not going to come to the library, whether it's because they don't think of it or they physically can't get there because their parents can't take them or things like that, which is a big thing in Hunterdon. I mean, we're not a walkable community by the slightest. So a parent has to take you if you can't drive yourself. So if we can't pull you in, how do we meet you where you are? So that's where we go a lot to the schools and do a lot of outreach there, because they will think of the library if they see the librarian where they are. So I think in that way, like a lot of the programming has changed, because I think traditionally there was sort of like a core group that always went to the library and you catered to those teens. And now I think most teen librarians are thinking about like, how do I reach more than just that 10 group of 10 that comes every day or whatever. So yeah, I've never really done the like traditional teen programming, but I know that it has changed a lot over time.
Yeah, it's just so wild to me how much has changed since, like, I feel like when I was a teen. So I'm always
Mhm,
just curious about that because, like, even with the adults, we have trouble like getting them in. And I'm like, how do we do better? Because yeah, like their schedules, you're right, dependent upon their parents.
mhm,
Whereas an
mhm.
adult, they're like, oh, I'll go if I feel like it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
tough. And I think even programming in general in libraries has changed. I think most libraries didn't really do a lot of programming, like besides children's programming back in the day. So now we're really rethinking how we serve our community, which I think is a good thing. It just takes a lot more work.
Okay, so for the next question, what is the best thing about your job and what is the least favorite thing?
So my favorite thing about my job is like getting to see the teens grow. I think that's such a cool position to be in. And I'm sure most teachers probably feel a lot of the same way of seeing someone grow from a sixth grader to a 12th grader, or in some cases, even if you're working closely with children's from like story time age to like high school, it's pretty wild. And I feel really privileged that I get to see teens grow like that. And that I get to be a part of that in some cases. So that's, I'd say, my favorite part of my job is being a part of that. My least favorite part is probably enforcing policies and procedures. I am the worst person to enforce the policies and procedures, and I know that they're there for a reason, and I know that we have to have them. But I'm the worst person to do that, and I always hate doing it, especially when it comes to like circulating materials. I just tend to like I'm like, just check them out. I want you to check them out. So I'm always trying to find loopholes to get people things. I know that's not necessarily the best way to do it, but it's something that I know is there for a reason. I just need to work on enforcing myself.
I know I'm also such a softie, so I would waive all the fines. I would just be like, you can check out 100 books. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so for our next question, what are your salary expectations and does your current job meet them? Are there opportunities for growth in your position?
So I think most people that go into public libraries don't expect to make a killing. And if you do, it's the wrong job. It's public service and it is what it is. And I think I luckily was pretty aware of that going into it, that I knew I wasn't going to be making six figures anytime soon, you know? And I think that that's okay because I love my job and I love what I do. I know that's not necessarily feasible for everyone, and I do feel for that. But I think I'm hopeful that communities are acknowledging the value of libraries, and I've seen the salaries creeping up a little bit, and also the sort of the community funding of libraries creeping up a little bit. So I'm hopeful that people are seeing the value of that. I think pretty much any public service job is underpaid for what they do. I mean, teachers are the perfect example, libraries, things like that. So but I think it was what I was expecting and what I was aware of. And I think growth in a position is really sort of what you want it to be. It may not be necessarily a next step up. And like teen services, I mean, as a department supervisor, that's kind of the top of what that would be. But I think growth in terms of what you can do and accomplish is a different story and something that I'm always looking to do. And I think knowing what kind of library worker you want to be is really important. I've said many times I don't really see myself as a director. I'm more of a on the ground, like I think a supervisor is probably the top of my top of what my growth trajectory will be, because I don't know that I want to take on what a director does on a day-to-day basis. But I think knowing that about yourself and being open to change and being open to other ideas is helpful too.
Mhm. I will say like that's always hard because like, knowing where you want to be in the career is interesting because you can only move up so far.
Mhm.
And then you're like, well, my only other option is become a supervisor. Well, if you don't want to do that though, it's
Exactly.
hard because I
Yeah.
feel the further you move up, the further you get away from the day-to-day of a librarian.
A
And
hundred
that
percent.
I feel is very, very sad because I like the interactions and small things.
Yeah, and I think too that's also an interesting point because I always felt the same thing. I was like, oh, if you like you can only go so far if you want to keep moving up and that kind of thing. But I also think knowing what kind of library you want to work in is important too. Because if you work in a small library, the director might be working shifts on the desk still and might
Mm,
still be checking out books and like I know in Maplewood, our director was very good about working a regular reference shift. Even in Hunterdon, a lot of the supervisors and administrators still come out and help as needed or have a regular shift. And I think that A, helps them keep one foot in reality of what's actually happening on the floor, and B, helps staff feel like they can relate to them better, which I think is really, really important. But it's obviously the bigger the library, the harder that gets. So
right.
I think if you're the kind of person that you're like, oh, I don't want to like lose touch with the day-to-day stuff, but like I kind of want to move up, I think a small library is probably a great bet, right? Because you can do a little bit
Mhm.
more in your position. So there's always a lot of different angles you can take it, which I think is nice about our jobs.
What advice do you have for new librarians or new graduates about to enter the field?
So kind of like my what I think landed my jobs, I think get involved. I mean, I cannot tell you how many opportunities I've had having been involved in NJLA, how many people I've met, how it's gotten me other opportunities, even in other things. I just think being willing to volunteer, and I know volunteering is a privilege, right? To have the time to volunteer and the support from your supervisor and things like that. I don't take that for granted by any means, but I think if you can even just mildly get involved in some capacity, it really helps get a sense of what the career is and how to meet people. I got involved very early on in my MLIS degree, and I am very glad that I did because I think it really introduced me to a lot more people and sort of put my name out there, made getting jobs a lot easier. So I think the sooner and quicker you do that, the better.
Mm. So are you still involved in Yas
I'm a little
or
involved in Yas. So my big thing, I've been very involved in NJLA as an organization. I'm on the executive board for New Jersey Makers Day.
okay.
I've done some like section work for Yes and CSS when I was a children's librarian. So I think finding your niche too in that is helpful. I think for me, I was never I liked youth services because I liked working with youth. I wasn't the kind of youth services librarian that was like really in love with all the books and things like that. So I kind of never clicked with like CSS and YAS as much. I liked more of the like overarching NJLA stuff. So I think again, knowing that about yourself of like, do you want to do more of that kind of work. And sometimes I had to push myself to do more of the yes stuff. So I'm like, I need to know what the books are. I need to know that part of my job too. But I think also finding your strengths and skill sets and what interests you is important. And there's something for everyone, which I really appreciate about our profession, but also the organization that we are kind of under through that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So then on to the next question. What do the job prospects look like for your type of position?
I do feel hopeful about sort of the job prospects for youth services and teen services in particular. I think a lot of libraries still don't have a teen services position, but are moving in that direction and seeing the value of having a dedicated teen librarian, having a dedicated teen department. I think Hunterdon originally we were all under youth services, and then when I started, that's when we sort of branched out as a teen department as its own. And I think that that's really set us apart in a way that's made it easier for us to move quickly and react to what the teen wants and needs are and things. So I've seen more and more libraries doing that. And I think that, again, they're recognizing the importance of seeing a library patron from birth to old age, right? You kind of need some dedicated staff through that whole process. So I've seen more and more teen services jobs open up, youth services jobs open up. And I think that I'm hopeful that that will continue.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I look forward to the day that like I see these kids grow into their teens, even though it horrifies me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So going on to the next question, what has been your biggest challenge in this profession?
So I think again, I've never, because my first teen librarian job, I wasn't big on the programming. I was really more about managing the teens, like managing the space. I had 50, 60 teens every day. It was just me and a
Wow.
part-time security guard. So we were really sort of like managing personalities. And I would do programs, but it had to be programs either that were like super low, like impact, easy to do, or involved everyone. So it was a weird balancing act. So now that I'm in a place that's a little more, again, teens aren't necessarily walking to the library here, so we have to pull them in. So thinking about how we do teen programming is a challenge for me that I think I'm enjoying. Rethinking sort of how I think about what teens are interested in, what teens of today are interested in, because that changes on a day-to-day basis. So I think that um, learning sort of what your strengths and weaknesses are and understanding that I know that I'm not good at those traditional things. And like, that's my challenge now is how do I get back to my basics and back to the roots of teen services? And I can still have fun and do some of those more big picture things, but I think it's been a nice challenge for me to get back to the roots on that.
So this is always my favorite question. So are there any accomplishments during your library career that you are particularly proud of?
Yeah, I'd say there are two that came to mind when I saw this question. So when I was working in Maplewood, you mentioned before that you grew up in South Orange. So there's sort of the sister city thing of Maplewood and South Orange. They have a shared school district, and we're very close with the libraries and everything. So my counterpart at South Orange, Keisha Miller, and I did a program called Giving Teens a Voice that we kind of thought up as we heard teens talking about issues that we thought were really important and that we thought they deserved a platform to talk about. So we sort of did this dual program across the two locations, and it was an opportunity for teens to talk about issues of race and identity and things like that. And it really took off, and I was really proud of the work that we did on that, and proud that we were able to collaborate as two libraries with the school district and with another community organization. So that was something that I was really proud of. And also, I recently, I guess a couple years ago now, finished a master's in public health through Johns Hopkins
Mhm.
through a fellowship. So the fellowship was designed for sort of non-traditional public health, and they were thinking about teachers and police officers and people that encounter the public but maybe haven't been trained to encounter the public. So when I applied, they had called me and they were like, "We love your application, but like we don't really know how the library fits in." And I explained sort of what a library does on a day-to-day basis, the social services we help with, the people we see, and all this stuff. And I think I really got an opportunity to change both my professors' perspectives about what the library can do for the community, as well as my classmates. And I since then have had a lot of my colleagues reach out to me through Hopkins and say like, "Hey, like we're talking to our local library about this. Like, how would you recommend we ask them about maybe offering a clinic or doing this?" And it's been really cool to sort of see them rethinking the library through working with me in classes and things like that. So I'm really proud that that I got into that program, that I was able to sort of show people what the library offers nowadays, and that if you haven't stepped foot, know since you were little, how it's changed.
Yeah, it's always wild to me how much we can offer, because even when the pandemic happened, we were getting calls being like, "Are we offering COVID tests?" And I was like, "I never really thought of us as a place, but maybe we should consider it,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
to help out the community." But yeah, it's just I didn't even know that fellowship was an opportunity. That's really cool to, like, rethink it in that way.
Yeah, and they've asked me since, like, if there's other librarians that are interested in it. Every year they admit new fellows, so I highly recommend it if you're interested. It was an amazing, amazing program. I now have a master's in public health that I'm
Oh,
not using
wow.
it like most people use theirs, but it like I got to focus on adolescent health, so I got to learn a lot about how the adolescent brain works, how we talk to teens, how we work with teens, and I think that's really enriched my work, and I'm hopeful that it also enriched my colleagues' works there of like how the library can support them. Yeah, oh, and that's what I love about NJLA is its opportunities to do that. So I think again, like I cannot say enough, get involved. The
Oh,
organization is
yeah.
only as good as the people that get involved in it. So I think that the more we can do that, the better.